Welcome to On the Ballot with Ballotpedia, where we take a closer look at the top political stories of the day. Ballotpedia connects people to politics by providing neutral, nonpartisan, and reliable information on our government, how it works, and where it's headed. I'm Victoria Rose, and thanks for being with us. Property taxes are used to fund all sorts of different municipal services. In California, local jurisdictions use parcel taxes, which are a specific type of property tax. Voters get to weigh in on whether or not these taxes get imposed, and many counties will have the chance to do so next week on March 5th when voters head to the polls. I'm joined now by a fellow member of the ballot measures team, also known as my boss, Ryan Byrne, for a quick explainer on what these taxes are and how they work. Ryan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about parcel taxes.
I knew you would be. These are one of those things that excite you, that don't excite most people, I would say. First off, what is a parcel tax and how does it work?
Right. So I think to explain a parcel tax, especially if you're outside California, it's really helpful to compare it to what you typically think of as a property tax, an ad valorem property tax. That's Latin for according to value. So an ad valorem tax is a tax based on value. In many states, local governments levy these taxes in which the property tax amount is a percentage of the property's assessed value, right? So it's based on market value and some other factors, things like that. It's probably what most people listening think of when they think of property taxes, unless perhaps you're in California. So a parcel tax is a tax on property that's not based on value. So it's a flat tax rate applied to all parcels. So if you're a homeowner, your residential property is a parcel. So with a parcel tax, regardless of whether your parcel is worth $300,000 or $5 million, it's still the same thing. It's a single parcel. It's going to have the same tax rate. All that said, local governments have gotten pretty creative. A parcel tax can't be based on value, but they can take into account some other non-value factors. So things like the footprint size of the buildings on the parcel, the acres of the parcel, how the parcel is zoned, so like residential versus commercial. Last year, there was a fun one where the parcels were differentiated based on the number of parking spaces on each parcel. So if you had more parking spaces, your parcel tax is more. So parcel tax need voter approval, and generally they need a 2/3 margin. So, that's like 66.666, so on and so forth. That doesn't apply to all parcel taxes. If they're initiated by citizens, it's only a simple majority. That's kind of a newer thing. In 2021, a court ruled that the 2/3 rule didn't apply to citizen-initiated parcel tax measures, but most parcel taxes are still kind of put on the ballot by local governments, whether that's school districts or special districts and not citizen groups.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't seen one initiated by citizens in a while. So yeah, not very common in California. Why are parcel taxes so common in California?
Yeah, so this requires us to go back a few decades. So in California, the parcel tax was developed for local governments to work around Proposition 13, which is perhaps one of the most famous ballot measures in U.S. history. Voters approved Proposition 13 in 1978. It was the beginning of a period in state politics that really, bounced around and went to a number of states that was referred to as the tax revolt. So Proposition 13 kind of set that off. It made several changes, including capping those value-based property tax rates. So those rates couldn't really increase above those 1970 levels, except there's a bit of a formula based on inflation and things like that. But overall, no sizable increases could be made. So parcel taxes are a way to get around Proposition 13 because they're not based on a property's value. Instead, they're based on the existence of the parcel itself. So they're common in California because they are largely a way to work with the state's limits on value-based property taxes.
That's pretty interesting. There are 15 counties in California voting on parcel tax measures next week on March 5th. Can you give our listeners a quick sampling of a few of them for how they work and what they would be funding?
Right. So across those 15 counties, there are actually 24 parcel tax measures. 11 of them are for school districts. The school boards vote to put them on the ballot. And it's largely to fund school-related services, right? So they can range from everything to constructing new facilities, maintenance, teacher salaries, things of that. 8 of them are for special districts. Some of the most common special districts that you see put these on the ballot are fire districts. Wildfires are a thing in California, right? So often there are these special districts set up to provide resources and things like that related to fire control. And then 5 of them are for cities or towns. So I think it's a little bit easier to explain them by providing examples. So I was looking through our list earlier today, and a lot of them are for pretty small towns. People outside California are not going to know about special districts in California. People in California may not even know about the special districts outside of the ones they live in. So I looked around and saw a name that I thought most people would recognize, Berkeley, California, right? In Berkeley, nothing new with the University of California, the local school district is asking voters to renew a parcel tax for 8 more years. That's not uncommon. Often there are sunset dates on them. So the school boards or other jurisdictions will ask voters to approve them again for an additional amount of time. So this one is, again, I was talking about parcels and way to divide them up. This one's actually a tax of 54 cents per building square foot, or $25 flat for an unimproved parcel. An unimproved parcel is one without any buildings. So like I said, unless it's a citizen-initiated measure, it requires a 2/3 vote. This one's from the school board. It requires a 2/3 vote.
So how often do school parcel tax measures specifically pass compared to those that are more general for municipal purposes, like funding roads or firefighters or things like that?
Right. So despite a 2/3 vote requirement, about 64% of the ones that provide school funding anyway have passed since the 1980s. I don't find this terribly surprising despite that 2/3 limit. I think when you look across the country and look at local ballot measures for schools, voters generally approve taxes or bonds or things like that to support school districts compared to other government bodies. So looking at parcel tax overall, including schools, but also special districts and cities, about 57% have been approved. So still a majority.
Very interesting. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your expertise, Ryan.
Yeah, at any time. Thank you.
And for our listeners, you can learn more about our election coverage at the link in our show notes. We'll be back later in the week with another ballot measure episode looking at California statewide ballot propositions. Make sure you subscribe to On the Ballot wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Victoria Rose, and thanks for listening.